The fat burning zone. It's the holy grail whenever you walk into the gym, right? You see those posters that say, this is your fat burning zone. This is where your heart rate should be if you want maximal fat loss. Because yeah, the big box gyms know exactly what we need for fat loss. Let's get real, guys. Hey, I'm Thomas Delauer, lead trainer and lead nutritionist on SixPackAbs.com and creator of the world's leading diet protocol, intermittent fasting course, science-based six pack. Also, the creator of the time under tension protocol and TDX Ignite, which is one of the leading bodyweight programs. Anyhow, let's get down to what's really happening. What I want to talk about is if that fat burning zone that we always see on the posters in the gym is really practical. Does it really mean that you're going to burn more fat if you're in that heart rate zone? I think we have to take a step back and we have to look at this with a true grain of salt. What are we after? Are we after maximal fat loss and maximal caloric burn? Or are we after a specific percentage of our calories burned being from fat? You see, what we have to learn here and what we have to understand is that when you compare 30 minutes of low intensity cardio, where it's said to be burning more fat, versus 30 minutes of high intensity interval training or just higher intensity activity at 70 to 75% of your heart rate, when you look at the numbers, it's pretty interesting. Okay, for example, 30 minutes of low intensity training is gonna burn approximately 200 calories total. Okay, about 80 of them are gonna come from carbohydrates, or glycogen that's coming from your muscles and getting released into your blood. And about 120 of those calories are going to come from fat. So you have a good amount of the calories coming from fat, a little bit more than half. Now let's look at the same amount of time that you're training, but doing it with high intensity interval training or just higher intensity activity to begin with. You burn a total of 400 calories, okay? But you burn 140 of those calories from fat and 260 from glycogen or carbohydrates. So pretty interesting, right? It's like you don't burn that much more in the way of fat calories, but your overall calories that you burn are significantly more, double that when you train at a higher intensity. So does that mean that you should be doing lower intensity activity in order to burn more fat? No, it ultimately means that if you work a little bit harder, then you are gonna burn more calories and ultimately burn more fat. I think we tend to overcomplicate things. If you're looking at it by a ratio, sure, you're gonna burn a tiny bit more of the fat from calories if you do lower intensity activity, but you have to look at things a little bit more relative. What kind of mood are you in? If you're in the mood for lower intensity activity, then sure, it's still gonna burn some fat, but accept that you're gonna burn less calories. If you're in the mood to grind it and kill it, grind it and kill it. Go for it. Don't force yourself to if you're not in the mood, but grind it and kill it. You're gonna burn more calories. And it happens for a multitude of reasons. The number one, your heart rate is getting out there. Of course you're burning calories. But number two, the catecholamine response. We're talking about adrenaline, norepinephrine, epinephrine, all these awesome catecholamines that stimulate the central nervous system and stimulate the sympathetic nervous system to burn more fat throughout the course of the day. Now, I'm not getting on my high horse and saying that high intensity interval training is better than low intensity. Not at all. They're equal and they have their benefits each way. But I don't want you to think that the fat burning zone is the end all be all. Now, let's take it one step further. If you're training fasted or if you're training fed, it makes a whole world of a difference. Remember, when you're training at a higher intensity, you're utilizing carbs more. So if you have food in your system, meaning you're not fasted, you're better off to do some high intensity interval training because you'll incinerate those calories that are floating through your bloodstream in the way of glucose. Remember, 260 calories being burned from carbohydrates versus 80 being burned from carbohydrates when you're doing low intensity. So the high intensity is going to utilize those carbs better and make it a lot better. But if you're in a fasted state, you're better off to do the fat burning zone, or the fat burning zone, I should say, because it's going to allow you to utilize fats a bit better. But people will talk about fasted training all the time and they'll say that you should do fasted cardio because you're gonna drain the glycogen in your tank first and it leaves you with nothing left but fat to burn. That's not how it works. How does that work if during fasted cardio you're doing a low intensity movement or low intensity activity and you're barely burning glycogen to begin with? You're barely burning carbs. Doesn't make sense. It would take you hours and hours and hours to drain that tank to ever burn fat through that hypothesis. The reality is that fasted training works well because you have what are called intramyocellular lipids that are inside your muscle, and those get recruited into the bloodstream as fuel. And that's only going to happen if you're fasted, and that's typically only going to happen if you're fasted and doing lower intensity activity. So you have to look at what you're after once again. If you're trying to lose the most amount of weight and you're trying to really push it in the gym, Don't shy away from the high intensity interval training or the high intensity activity simply because you're getting inside your own head. 400 calories is a lot more than 200. Plain and simple. 400 calories, you're gonna burn a lot more fat, and you're gonna lose a lot more weight. So I hate to be the bearer of some pretty simple news, but that's just what it comes down to. Don't overcomplicate it. As always, keep it locked in here on SixPackAbs.com, your leading hub for exercise, nutrition, and everything fasting and time under tension. See you in the next video.